Hey, you awesome folks! Thanks for taking this journey of discovery with your guide, Keith Haney. You're listening to the Becoming Bridge Builders podcast, your favorite podcast for everything from racial reconciliation to education innovation, justice reform, and leading change in the 21st century. This podcast is for people who love to be challenged with difficult topics, but want practical solutions to solve these challenging issues. Becoming Bridge Builders makes change possible. Each week on the podcast, Keith invites innovative thought leaders to share how they are building bridges in their area of expertise. You will hear breakthrough ideas and concepts that are changing the world. He's featuring guests who are best-selling authors, leaders at Microsoft, entrepreneurs, leading educators, professors, lawyers, and so many more. Listen in to learn how you can be the bridge to the change you are seeking.
My guest today is Dr. Amanda Brisebois, who has been involved in many levels of healthcare leadership over her career, including as medical director of the Gray's Nuns Community Hospital, medical director of the Palliative Institute, and associate chief medical officer, all with Covenant Health. She's also a physician consultant for the Alberta Medical Association and a physician advisor for the Edmonton Zone Medical Staff Association. She actively promotes health workplaces through multiple aspects of her work. As a result of her interest in education, she has also served as an inaugural examination board member of 2 new Royal College specialties, general internal medicine and palliative medicine. Dr. Brisebois' clinical areas of expertise are chronic illness, transitions of care, and promoting health work environments and healthy living for all who face illness. Her areas of expertise are diverse and include training and equity, diversity and inclusion, conflict and mediation, leadership, and coaching. We welcome her to the podcast. Well, welcome today. How are you doing today, Doctor?
I'm doing great.
Good to have you on.
How are you doing?
I'm good.
Thank you.
Enjoying the sunshine.
It's sunny here, but I'm in Canada, so it'd probably be fairly cold for a lot of people.
Most likely, yes. I love to ask my guests this question. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
You know, it's interesting how you take advice from people or how you give advice to people, but every piece of advice that I've received that was really, really impactful was about not making it about me.
Mm.
And so I remember when I was leaving the hospital one day and I just got my first leadership role. I never really wanted to be in leadership. And I just got the first role and I walked by a very senior cardiologist, very smart guy that I respected very much. And he turned and he stopped and he said, "Brisebois, give me a minute." He goes, I'm like, okay. He said, "Don't take it too seriously. Don't get too stressed about it. It's not about you." And I thought, at the time, wow, that was nice because it was interesting going into something new. But that was many years ago now. And I've had more pieces of advice like that. You know, make it about the other people in the room. Listen to the other perspectives. How do you actually engage yourself? How do you surround yourself with people smarter than you? And those kind of comments really are the best ones I've ever received.
That is good advice. I like that because it really isn't about us. If we get outside of our own head, outside of our own sphere, we are better able to empathize with people, to see their points of view and not be so caught up on what we want to say or do at the time.
Yeah, it was really great advice.
Yeah. I'm always curious, too, with my guests, who are some people in your life who maybe were inspirational to you? It's an opportunity if you kind of give them a shout out and thank you for being so impactful.
I'm laughing because that add on there about giving them a shout out. Look, you know, it's very hard, and you're going to laugh when you find out who it is that really has impacted me the most because I can't give her a shout out. But, you know, the people that I really aspire to, and this may sound really rude, but there's very few of them. And the reason there's very few of them is they are so giving of themselves to a point where it takes away from their own lives.
Mm.
And I don't think there's many of them, and I'm probably not one of them either. Like that actually makes your life uncomfortable so that others can benefit. And I always think about Mother Teresa because it's that person that really gives. And actually beyond her, it's the people that I don't know that have very little and they still give, take people into their homes when they have almost nothing. And those kind of people that really inspire me. And so when I meet them, I usually stop and say, or, sometimes it's just on the TV, something they're talking about somebody who's had 18 foster kids and they have no house. It's those people that really inspire me.
Yeah.
And so shout out to all those people.
Yeah, no, those are good. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm always curious with my guests too, to kind of give us your backstory, give us how you got from where you began to where you are right now in your career and in your life.
Mm-hmm. I was lucky. I was raised in Canada. I had 2 teachers as parents. So I really had a pretty easy upbringing compared to lots of people that I see on this earth now. And they're both very educated. So I just assumed I would go into something scholarly, which on retrospect maybe wasn't the right thing. But that's what I did because, you do what you know sometimes. So I went and did my master's degree in insect neuroscience. And somehow that led me into medicine. And I remember at a conference, it was something about teaching. I thought, I'm going to be a doctor. And the funny thing is, I didn't even know what doctors did. Like I had a doctor. I didn't know there were different specialties. I didn't know that there were surgeons. Like, I don't know. I wasn't very well informed. I have no doctors in my family. And I was doing my master's degree and my advisor's like, wow, you shouldn't do that. That's a lot of work. And I'm like, what do you know? So I got into medicine and I'm not like a naturally brilliant person. I work really hard, very studious. And so I got in and I started thinking, I like people. I love talking to people, like hearing people's stories. And that's why I loved actually the title of your podcast, this Becoming Bridge Builders, because I like hearing about other people and how to help them live their lives. And I loved that piece of medicine, but I didn't like the technical piece of medicine. Like, I'm going to look at your blood test and I'm going to fix your x-ray and divulging the patient from their data. I didn't like that. And that's actually when I went back to be a coach, because I thought there was a discrepancy in what we were doing as physicians for what the patients needed. It's like, I want to know how to integrate my patient into care. So I became a wellness coach and it changed everything. It changed how I talked to patients, what kind of questions I asked them. And did I ever start to learn a ton about people? It made me realize some of the gaps and kind of how we were doing medicine. And that's when I got into leadership and higher level of physician leadership, but seeing more and more gaps in both my abilities to help people. Maybe I'm like, I don't know if I have the right training to do this. I'm not sure I have the right training to solve problems. All these problems put on my plate during the pandemic, and I couldn't seem to get people solutions. So that's when I went back and I did more coaching and team coaching and all of these different types of coaching. And then I started working on conflict negotiation mediation and became a mediator. Not because I wanted to be a mediator, but it was so fascinating how we get along. And how do we solve problems that I just did all the courses. And one day she said, are you sure you don't want to write the exam? Because you just write the exam and you'll have the certification. So I wrote it. But that's kind of how I've ended up being. I help healthcare teams and individuals really recognize how our differences can make our lives better and how our conflicts can be huge successes for our teams if we actually approach it that way. And so it's been this huge morph from being a pure frontline clinician, no other role really, to this small piece of clinical work, which I still do because I want to stay connected to people that way. And also really supporting teams and healthcare providers and patients, ultimately understanding how the differences around us can make us better.
I want to drill down on something you just said, because I know as a patient myself, sometimes I go into a doctor's office and I just kind of feel like the doctor and I aren't connecting. They seem to have an agenda that they want to push on me. I want to push back and ask more questions. And sometimes the more questions I ask, the more uncomfortable a doctor gets. So how do you, like you talk about, how do you reconcile that? Because it seems like they have a lot of patients to see in a small amount of time to make this profitable. And I get that. but I want to know more questions before I just take your recommendation. Not that questioning your expertise, but I've done my own research, and it seems like sometimes doctors kind of ignore the fact that the patient actually has done some reading on his own as well. So kind of tell us a little bit about that conflict you talked about, the disconnect that you notice in the healthcare profession.
We could talk a long time about this. Look, we're trained as physicians to be very, put things in the box, make them normal, help get the blood sugars normal, get the blood pressure normal. So, and there's so much data out there for medical students to know and understand that that's a big focus. And we're trying very hard to integrate the patients and how do we ask the patients questions. But I don't feel we're there yet, so that when I sit in front of you, I say to you, what does it mean for you to have this illness? And actually start with that rather than, hey, your blood sugars are off.
Right.
And so I'll say to patients, when you go to your physician, what part of my goals can we incorporate into the conversation? And how do those goals look? And how I want to live my life? How does that look? And how does that integrate with what you're trying to help me with? And those open-ended questions can hopefully allow them just to pause for a minute to say, is what I'm doing and what I'm recommending helping that person get towards their goals? And in coaching, we do a lot of these, small, achievable goals and make sure patients can find that they can integrate whatever we're suggesting in their lives. We want our blood sugar to be under control and boing, right away. Well, the patient has to make a lot of changes to make that happen. And maybe that's not something they can do right now because they have some other stressor. So how do we as physicians and you as a patient connect with your physician to say, can we just stop for a minute and let me share with you the reasons in my life that make this goal difficult? And can you work with me so that we understand each other better?
I like that.
And the good doctor will allow you to stop. And sometimes there's good doctors who are stressed, and I talk to a lot of them. They're stressed, and that's where you get that 10-minute thing or whatever it is. Like, come on, I can't even keep my office open if I don't see however many people, or I have these pressures. So sometimes it's recognizing that there may be pressures there. So how can you both achieve your goals? And that's a good question to your doctor. How can we both achieve our goals?
I like that. So are there some questions as a patient that you would say would help facilitate that conversation with your doctor, knowing his pressure or their pressure, your pressure, to kind of begin to be on the same page?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
And now a word from one of our sponsors, For Freedom Mobile. If you're using AT&T, Verizon, or T-Mobile, then you're being tracked. Mobile providers collect your location, communications, internet activity, even your financial transaction. They sell that data to anyone willing to pay for it and provide it to the government without a warrant. Switch to For Freedom Mobile, and you won't ever have to worry about big tech or Big Brother tracking you through your mobile phone again. For Freedom Mobile provides secure, unlimited talk, text, and high-speed data for just $29.99 a month, and it includes free internet roaming in over 200 countries. Sign up for the service by visiting forfreedommobile.com and using the promo code BridgeBuilders to get your first month for only $9.99. See forfreedommobile.com for details, just like the number 4, freedommobile.com.
I think something simple like that. I always tell people to start with what, how, and tell me about. But because it's very open and you can allow them in a non-judgmental way to give an idea of what you need. So how can I integrate your advice to me with what I'm able to do? Or what does success look like to you? And I'll share with you what success looks like to me.
Right.
And then how do we talk about what that looks like moving forward? So I think those things are really good, to be honest, to say, I'm listening to you and I respect what you're saying. I also need to say something so that we can get this done. And that gives both of you power, I think. It gives them the understanding of where you come from as a patient. Because I tell you, physicians are like, I don't know why my patient's not doing what I'm telling them to do. I was like, that telling thing is part of the problem.
Exactly.
It needs to be a team effort so that we give information. I always say to my patients, here's what I know. Here's what I know that you have. I'll talk to them if they want the information. Not everybody does, but if they want it, I'll tell them this is the deal and give them the information. Say, where does that fit in for you? And I can give you advice on how to optimize this and that. I can, provide you interesting things that you could do, but none of that's going to work unless it's something that you're driving. So you tell me, of all those things I've told you, where do you want to start? And this is hard, though, because we're not trained this way. And when I said I went back to be a coach because I felt that exact disconnect that you're describing. And that took a lot of training. And I always say to physicians, you don't have to become a coach. You don't have to become a mediator to gain some of those skills. Even if we ask our patient, hey, I told you all this, what does that feel like? What position does that put you in? What do you think you can achieve of all that stuff? I'm going to be here for you. And if we can teach physicians just little things like that to kind of turn it around so that you as a patient feel more engaged and feel more heard, then hopefully everyone will do better.
So how does what you do work in the context of the hospital system?
Well, as a physician, like as a person who does it on a regular, so my main specialty, I have two specialties. One's general internal medicine, which is a adult medicine, complex illness specialty. And my other specialty is palliative medicine. And that's people with chronic illness, living for years, but also end of life care. And when I use these strategies, I think it's amazing. My patients love it. They feel connected. They're always very grateful. And it works from my perspective. And I think it's hard, though, to get other physicians to you have to want to do it as a physician, and you have to have the time to do it, and you have to see the success, and you have to have a patient that has that interest too. So I think it's just complex. These kind of things really work. It's just a matter of how do we kind of create small changes here and there. And people are doing that. There's lots of physicians that do operate like that. It's just if you're not connecting with your physician, I always say to people, like sometimes you do have to find someone that's willing to answer those questions so that you can be more of a team than kind of a teller and a doer, if that makes sense.
It does.
But it does work. Yeah.
So what gets you up in the morning? What's your why at this point of your career?
Yeah. Well, I'm in the last, I'm hoping, stages of my career. Really what I get up for is to try to help people just feel more connected. And if that's with their physician or if it's on their healthcare team, I'm heavily invested right now in healthcare teams in enjoying their jobs. But these principle goes to any team. When you get up for work, if someone says, hey, I didn't quit because Dr. Brisebois and I chatted for an hour and she gave me some structure, because most of what I'm doing is creating structure for people solving problems. It's not just, hey, solve your problem. It's here's some strategies for it. And if I can make people enjoy their lives better and not want to quit and just feel like they have more people around them, that's my why.
That's great.
And it's nice to get up in the morning and know that there's pieces of that I'm doing.
As I looked at your bio, you had, and I thought, an interesting combination of things besides the chronic illness and the other things you do. You also do training in equity, diversity, and inclusion. And, those have become interesting buzzwords. And when you put those into situations like the healthcare, it causes people even some more concern on some parts. So kind of as before we get into what you do with that, maybe it's helpful for us to have definitions of how you define diversity, equity, and inclusion in your context.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's kind of a global context probably, but there's tons of definitions out there. Look, I'm going to start that with, I got that training because I felt deficient. I'm a white middle-class woman. So I would try to talk to people and try to be these inclusive, and I'll give you your definitions of what I feel like. But I went to get that training because I thought I got to do better.
Sure.
So, diversity is differences. And differences can range from the individual to the group, to the organization, to the society. Like, how do we ensure that all of these differences are honored? And then this gets into the other segments of the other definitions. But if you've heard of the term intersectionality, it's all these little pieces of us that make us different. So I said, I'm white. I'm a physician. I'm a mother. So, all these things that I've come from a middle-class family. I have multiple secondary education. So, you pick all these little pieces that could put you in a pod or a section of something. And so how does that define me? Well, you want all of these things to be acknowledged. So those are, diversity is really all of those kind of differences, all of our intersections. And then equity. We'll go with equity next. So, everyone talks about equal. So everyone getting the same. So equity is not that. Equity is people recognizing all those intersections that we have. The opportunities are similar or the same. So how do we make opportunities the same? The equity. And that there's lots of discussion about that. And I don't know if you've ever seen the little graphic of the 3 people trying to see a baseball game with the fence in front of them, and one's shorter and one's middle and one's tall, and the little person can't see over. And then they describe equity as they give the size of box that you need to see over the fence, so that regardless of what your height was, they made it so that you could all see over the fence. But there's many progressions to that now. That why should we have to have a box? Why should that person who's not as tall have to have a box? And so the next progression of that is removing the fence. They sort of talk about liberation, I think, is one of those things. And how do you actually have this evolution so that we don't have to talk about, so we really have these opportunities that are the same, that we can all see no matter what all our intersections are. So I think your definitions are this kind of process. And so inclusion is getting to that spot, where we can make sure that people, despite all of these intersectionalities and things that we have, feel that they have the same opportunities and that we belong. It's that sense of belonging. And how do we feel respected and able to belong?
The thing I run across when I talk to a lot of my guests about this, I talk about this a lot on my podcast, is because it's been politicized. What you just said sounds really good in terms of, we want to make sure people are heard and they're seen in who they are, and they're not dealt with in a universal way, in a kind of a blanket way. We're not all the same. We have unique things. Like if I'm an African American, I may have certain dispositions in terms of healthcare that other people don't. So you might want to test for those more that are different nationality or population group. So we recognize that, and that helps to get to better care. If you recognize I may have some of the things, the sickle cell, for example, that show up more in Black people than other races. But we've taken this term and we've made it so toxic that we try to ignore that there are differences, and we do have differences. And so we can't talk about those honestly, because they trigger people to where now we're picking sides in this. And so I'm just kind of curious, in your work, how do you talk about that in a way that doesn't put people off who see this, we're catering to a certain population group, or we're ignoring somebody else? So in order for us to have diversity, equity, and inclusion, we have to, discredit someone like yourself who is white, who is middle class, and we have to make them feel less than so we can lift up somebody. So how do you deal with all of the issues that we have kind of put on DEI in the work that you do?
It's interesting because I just don't ever talk about EDI in my work. So that's kind of interesting. I'll explain what I do talk about. I really found I worry a lot about the division that it can create, that, people who feel bonded in a certain group or with a certain characteristic or intersection, they get more connected. And then the people that aren't like them get disconnected, and we're creating these more disconnection than connection. And I worry so much about that. I see that. I have 3 sons who are all in their 20s, and they talk about that. They're all white men. So, they have their own sense of where they belong and what that looks like. And they want to have friends of all different race, age, color, gender, everything. And they're not actually have access to that for multiple reasons. So, what I always say, and my mantra is turning our differences into successes. And I like talking about our differences. I don't really say, hey, this is equity, diversity, inclusion, because it is partly what you're talking about, is creating this negative. We go from one negative word or term that society deems is great, and then 5 years later it's negative. And then we create another term that's okay, and then 5 years later it's negative.
Right.
And another term that's okay. I have a chronic illness, so I have MS, I have chronic pain. And my son and I were talking about the word disability because you can't use it anymore. So we've created new terms. And in 5 years, that's probably not going to be okay. And then we create new terms. My whole thing is, how do we talk to each other, understanding that we're different, and learn to embrace those things and ask people questions. I am not perfect. And I'm the first person to always say, I'm not perfect. So if I'm in a forum or if I'm giving a talk, at the beginning, I'll say, look, if I say something that in any way doesn't sit well with anyone, rather than sending it to me afterwards in a comment, write it now, say it now, because you'll probably learn more from saying it now to me in the forum and everyone just saying, oh, okay, yeah, that didn't sit well with me either, than after the fact. So how do we have these in the moment connections with people? So someone can say to me, I'm really uncomfortable in this forum for this reason. And we can just talk together. So that's my approach. I'm really trying to focus on the fact that we have so many differences, but we also have so many similarities that we just don't get to because we're stuck in those differences and thinking those differences won't move us forward, when really the differences and recognizing them will make us realize, wow, we actually have also a lot in common.
Right.
And hey, we have common goals, and hey, we're working together. And I had a physician say once in one of our meetings, he's a Black male physician, and we were chatting, and he was talking about some of the struggles as a Black male physician. And it was such an amazing conversation. And I said to him, I feel very selfish because I'm learning so much from him, from my perspective, but I'm not dealing with it. And because I'm not the same person. And he's like, well, what do you go through? And so I was talking about being a female leader and, other things. And it didn't change what we went through. It didn't change that, he felt marginalized in some ways and other ways and what our experiences were. But we came bonded because we're like, oh, cool. That's what you go through. Hey, if you ever want to chat, I'm here. He's like, if you ever want to chat, I'm here. And we had different things we faced, but by knowing each other better, then when something happens on the team, we're like, oh, okay, we actually kind of understand each other better. And I'll understand your reaction a bit better because I know you. And so I think the more we talk and recognize how we're different, the more we'll understand those differences are great. That's my theory.
No, I like that, because I think I just had another guest on my show who does DEI training in HR. And he says he's trying to create a place where, in the workplace, where you psychologically protect people in the DEI space. So again, same approach you kind of have about it, in that we don't look at it so that we isolate people, but so that we better include people and better create a sense of belonging. And I think that's where the conversation has gotten lost, and we've created more division because we're not looking at, I can't ignore who you are because you are different, you are unique. You may have different uniquenesses, skills that if I don't talk to you about them, I'll never discover what those are. So I want to figure out how to better appreciate you. And the same thing I hope you would do for me by getting to know me better beyond just the surface. And I think we're missing that in so much of our conversation. How do we get to know people on a deeper level, more than just their name and the external things that we see every day?
Mm-hmm. And I think there's a lot of fear. I know for myself, I'm always scared I'm going to say something wrong. I don't want to offend anyone. Like, that's the last thing I want to do. And even with that training, it was like a year-long training of different courses. And one of the things I learned the most was all of the people around the table, like all their experiences. But I said to them too, I'm scared I'm going to say something wrong that will offend someone when I had no intention of offending them, because I'm absolutely not a perfect person. And so I'm hoping that the more of us that create the environment that, look, I'm well-intentioned, I'm open to whatever you have to say to me. I want to hear it. I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to say, don't ever say that to me. I'm going to say, tell me that again, so I can really understand you and get an idea of what's important to you. And you know, when people come on teams, to let people introduce themselves and what's important to you, and do that around the table so that people feel safe, you know, that sort of catchphrase word these days. But it's just about being open to sharing and being vulnerable, and that I can be wrong and please tell me when I'm wrong, kind of thing.
I love that.
Yeah.
I'm curious for you, what are you excited about in this season of your life?
I always said that I want to be involved in growth. So, you know, it's interesting looking at my career, because I did this certain just medicine for 10-year pod. And then I'm like, this isn't good enough. I gotta think better. I gotta do better. I'm always trying to be better. This next phase is really about reaching out to as many people as I can with just some of these ideas of how do we actually think in a processed way when something happens that makes us uncomfortable. And so if you said something to me now that I felt was negative, how do I say, oh, that's so interesting? You know, our natural instinct is to get upset or to hang up or just quick end the call or something. But how do we rephrase things and actually take a moment to breathe, to think about it, to think about how I'm feeling and how you're feeling. And so and actually think through the issues, you know, what was it that he wanted to tell me? What was the issue? You know, it wasn't that I, you know, took the last box of cereal. What was it about that cereal? You know, what was important about the cereal? And so I'm really helping people work through issues and process when we hit these kind of barriers in our life. And that is what's next for me. I love it. And I tell you, it's changed my own life. It's been very interesting. My husband and I laugh about it all the time because he isn't as into this kind of thing as I am. And, but it'll be funny. I did an example of loading the dishwasher for somebody because they couldn't figure out how to actually work through the issues. And I was changing, you know, very positional comments like, I hate the way you load the dishwasher, or you're breaking all the dishes, and turning into them, oh, it's really important that we don't lose our dishes because we can't afford to buy new ones. And so it was so funny because I worked through it, and I said to my husband, I actually don't need that conversation anymore. We've been arguing about this for years. And it's like, yeah, I don't actually really want to have a clogged dishwasher and call the plumbing people and figure it out. So by working through the issue, it totally solved the problem for me. So it's quite fascinating to realize if we actually step back and think, you know, what is it about my reaction just as much as our action? Like, how can I make a difference? Even if something happens that makes me feel uncomfortable, how can I reframe that? And then even if I walk away, how then do I work through that when I get home so it doesn't simmer and that I'm part of the solution? And this is very exciting because it's really helps people. And I've had people who are ready to quit who then work through the issues that they're facing. And they're like, wow, the issue was totally different. And when I sat in front of the person, they totally agreed with me. And I don't want to quit anymore. And that is so rewarding.
Well, that really is rewarding.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great.
So if I gave you the microphone for 5 minutes, you get a chance to address the world, what would you say?
I just said it. No. Rewind. I always tell people, watch things at 2 times speed. It happens much easier. Look, if I could have this platform, I would say when you go places and you're doing things, look at the people who are with you. Think when someone says something to you before you say something back to them that's not thought about. Really think about what the issue is. And when you think through the issue, think about why they care. Think about people in a positive intent. Take some time to work through things. Be a bit more methodical, not reactive, and pay attention to each other. Not just what you think they are. and not your assumptions, but what they really are. And that means asking those really great open-ended questions. And when you ask the one, like, what does that mean to you? And they answer you, don't walk away. Ask them 3 more. It's always that thing, and you learn so much, and your life will be so much more rich because you will really know the person you're either working with or your partner or your kids, rather than kind of thinking you know. And the more that we do that, I think the better we'll all be together, because when something really tough happens, when you know somebody and you know you can ask them tough questions, you're going to get through it. And that's my message.
I love it.
Yeah.
As you think about your life, what do you want your legacy to be?
It's interesting. I've thought a lot about legacies, and I've talked to a lot of people about this, because people will say, oh, what do you want to leave the planet? And I'm like, most of us don't leave these massive legacies.
Right.
And to be reality, to be real. I'm in palliative medicine. I'm fully prepared for the end of my life. I know it will come some point. And I don't think that I know that I don't need a global impact. And, it's interesting how we think of our lives. And I think we're trained to almost think, oh, I've got to do something massive. It has to be globally changed, or it has to be some big deal. My thing is that, I'll have people that come back to me and say, that really saved my job. Or I have students come back and say, that really shaped how I talk to my patients. Like, my whole practice has changed. And my legacy, I'm hoping, is that there's this smattering of people that disseminate, that I've kind of met and touched along the way, who make a difference, who they make a difference then. And it's going back to that initial, what was the best piece of advice? It's not about me. I'll pass away and hopefully then become part of the earth. And it's who you touch and who they, and I mean who you impact, and how they then go on and create change. And then how do they create change within someone else? And it may just be one sentence that someone goes home with and says, I'm going to ask that a little differently. Or maybe if someone makes me feel uncomfortable, I'm going to say, tell me more about that. It's really important for me to know what you think. So that's I hope, going to be what people remember me as, is just somebody who's trying to support individuals along the way, and that then they in our better capacity to then create their own greatness in the world. And someday one of those people may be one of those global people. But if they're not, I'm okay with it too.
That's awesome. Is there anything I haven't asked you that we should have covered?
I don't think so. I sit in front of people and I think, you must be a very interesting person. I always feel sad that I don't get to know more about you. But that would take a lot longer than you have. And I'm sure your listeners know about you, but you don't know. And yeah, I guess the only thing is that I'd like people to leave thinking, what is it that you can do differently to make both your day and life better in this kind of capacity? And when you meet people, how can you reach out to people to kind of pass those messages on? And even if there's 1 or 2 people that say, yeah, there is something I can do at work, or I am actually going through something at work that I'm going to put a little more thought to and really figure out what everyone around the table is thinking, then that's a good thing. So whatever each person can do, really think about it, because you all can make a huge, huge difference in your lives.
Where can people connect with you and follow and learn more about you?
I just saw here, my name's up there. My website is Amanda Brisebois, MD, like physician.com. And if you're interested in just kind of the team building things, there's some stuff on there. I'm mostly working, so it's not a really robust website. But look, what's on there is a reach out to me. And that's really why I have that website. So if you have any questions or just want to say, hey, this really resonates with me, you can message me on there. I'm on LinkedIn under Amanda Brisebois, same spelling. And reach out to me and just say hi. I love to hear people's perspectives. I love to hear when it doesn't resonate with you. I want to hear those voices. They say, hey, you know what? I was listening and this piece, I want to hear what you have to say more because it doesn't feel right. So yeah, my website and then LinkedIn, please reach out anytime. Absolutely love to hear from people on this subject.
Well, thank you, Dr. Brisebois, for being on my podcast and kind of sharing with us a little bit about your heart and about your passion to, connect the disconnect between doctor and patient and coaching us on how to better communicate, because it really is so important that we have that communication with our doctor, our physician, that they hear from us, because we're working at this together for our betterment. And we do want to make sure that we are working toward wellness and we're getting better. So this is a partnership, and how do we do that more effectively? So thank you for what you do.
Thank you for having these podcasts. I always say to my kids, we're all building something for the next people who come along, and they're building something for those next people. And goodness knows we see so many things happening on this earth that it would be nice if they were going differently.
Yes.
Let's all work together to be those bridge builders. I think that's an amazing, amazing plan.
Thank you so much, Doctor.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to Becoming Bridge Builder. If you enjoyed this episode and want to help support the podcast, please subscribe and share it with others. Post about it on social media or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from me, you can follow me on Instagram at @bkeithhaney and on Getter and Twitter @RevHeadpin or on his website at alightbreakthrough.org. Thanks again, and tune in next time.
Do you know that most entrepreneurs hit a revenue ceiling and have no idea why? They're working harder, spending more money, running more ads, but revenue stays flat. My friend Dr. Noah St. John calls this the invisible break. He's giving our listeners a free revenue ceiling audit to help you see what's really holding you back. You'll get a free 30-day membership to NoahBot, giving you access to Dr. Noah's 30 years of experience to help you reach your next level. But hurry, because there's only 50 available this month. So if you're tired of being stuck at the same revenue level and want to finally break through, get your free revenue ceiling audit at drnoahvault.com in the affiliate link that'll be listed in the show notes.
Thanks for listening to Becoming Bridge Builder. If you enjoyed this episode and want to help support the podcast, please subscribe and share it with others. Post about it on social media or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from me, you can follow me on Instagram at @bkeithhaney and on Getter and Twitter @RevHeadpin. Thanks again, and tune in next time.